The night before we reached the estuary of Ours, rumour walked our decks like a boatswain who had forgotten his own whistle. We heard it in the rasp of ropes, in the hush between bell strokes. A river that was not water, but polished brass, that wound through the lost gulf like a dangling chain, ticking where waves should sigh. Every tide, the tale insisted, turned all its glinting faces until the hours aligned with some hidden geometry, and when the chime rolled out, sailors who had wandered too long at sea found their bygone lives resetting like opened pocket watches. Others woke as children in forgotten harbours. Others woke nowhere at all. I, Salem Quick, shipped as chronicler aboard the bark Firefly. I had accepted Captain Melissa's silver to record our passage in ink that no metronome could smudge. But the closer we motored toward that legendary confluence, the more I wondered whether any page, any word, could withstand a tide that broke time itself. Still, duty was a comforting coffin. Each dusk I sharpened my quills, logged longitude, sketched constellation. Though even the stars seemed uncertain when we neared the Clock River, they shifted by half a finger breadth each time I blinked. We sighted land on the seventh dawn, low slate cliffs tufted with violet moss. Between those cliffs, the river spilled like molten hardware, thousands of round dials clattering over one another, their crystal faces flashing heliograph signals from centuries that had never met. The form of water persisted only in suggestion. Liquidity belonged to the way the clocks flowed, rolling and shouldering past one another with liquid indifference. Where light touched them, they glimmered. Where shadow pooled, they turned dark as gunmetal midnight. The captain ordered sails furled and engines lowered. The Firefly's hull kissed the fringe of that impossible current, and every compass shuddered dead. I glanced at the helmsman. His eyes mirrored the whirl of second hands below, as though the river were already winding him. "Ready anchor!" Captain Mellis barked, but when the boatswain released chain, it rattled through the hawse unimpeded. The anchor never found purchase, only plunged, struck a submerged clock face with a resonant gong, and rebounded. The vibration tremored through the planks underfoot, a pulse impossible to distinguish from the beating of one's own heart. At midday, the tidal bell tolled. No bell hung on our vessel. The sound rose from everywhere at once, colossal and minute. The air rippled. Brass faces beneath the Firefly rotated together as if seized by a single key. Noon became midnight, became dawn in the space between footsteps. I stumbled, caught myself on a rail, and registered the sudden hush. Seabirds on the cliffs had frozen mid-cry. Wings hung like thrown daggers. Even the wind forgot to breathe. "Log that," the captain murmured. I tried. My pen touched parchment, but the ink refused to flow. Its surface quivered, caught by a countercurrent. When I lifted the nib, I saw not letters, but faint ellipses. Outlines of words I had not yet written. Unsettled, I pocketed the journal and took stock of my crew. One sailor, Rig by name, stood at the bulwark, staring into the clocks. Some said at law, Drig by name. Tears blurred his weather-beaten cheeks. I approached. Where he looked, a vignette unfolded beneath the glass of the dials. A younger Rig stacking cray pots on a humble pier. A woman with tide-coloured ribbons kissing him goodbye. The vision spun 30 degrees, and now the same pier lay broken by a storm. Rig reached down as if to mend it, but his hand met only brass and ticking. "It's my wedding day again," he whispered, "but it keeps slipping." Another man, Esdras Finch, leaned against the mainmast, laughing into his fists. With every peal of unseen bells, his beard shortened, lengthened, vanished. In one breath, he was 20. In the next, he became old enough to taste his childhood as afterburn on his tongue. Finch had once shown me a faded sketch of a son lost overboard in the Mirror Sea. Now, as I watched, the sketch re-etched itself on the parchment tucked in his pocket. The boy grew older, younger, unborn, alive, lost again. Finch wept and guffawed interchangeably, as though both emotions were twin sails on the same mast. Night fell, though no sun set. The world simply chose darkness, and we drifted along spotlit by the iridescent glow of luminous numerals. Up, up, glittering like reef fish under moonless waves. Somewhere springs coiled, elsewhere escapements clicked in a rhythmic lullabies. I could feel each cog revolve behind my sternum. "Tomorrow," the captain declared, "we launch the skiff and sound deeper." She retreated to her cabin, but I remained. Curiosity outbid fear in me, and I studied the current. If every tide truly reset forgotten timelines, then these clocks were both record and engine of that miracle. Yet whose hand wound them? What mainspring commanded such choreography? I gazed until fatigue nipped me. When at last I sought my hammock, the corridor lengthened beyond reasonable geometry, carrying me through decades of half-remembered voyages, wintering in the Antumbra Firth, escorting pilgrims to the Amber Crags until I located my berth. I fell into uneasy sleep, punctuated by chimes. Dawn's light, when it came, had a hollow quality, as though passing through thick glass. A handful of crew were missing, their hammocks perfectly made. Among them was Rig. In his place hung a single ribbon the colour of the tide, tied to the beam in a sailor's farewell knot. Finch, meanwhile, occupied 2 hammocks simultaneously, flickering between them like a broken film strip. One moment he snored in the port sling, the next in starboard, then both empty. We launched the skiff regardless. The captain, myself, Finch, and 2 deckhands, Sable and Kojiro, rowed against the gliding procession of dials. Oars met reluctant resistance, for the clocks parted under pressure only to snap shut again, like oysters protecting time's pearl. A mile in, the captain shipped the oars. Listen, between ticks a faint singing rose. It sounded nautical, yet chromatic, like chant refracted through cathedral glass. We followed the melody until the river yawned wider, and there lay a ship's graveyard. Vessels of every make and century linked gunwale to gunwale, held fast by rivulets of interlocking watchbands, their masts draped with hour hands instead of sails. Phantom crews milled along decks, fating with each turn of the tide, then congealing again. One apparition, a girl no taller than my chest, stood at a gangway plucking broken mainsprings like harp strings. She wore a captain's bicorn far too large, and her eyes were a clockmaker's calipers measuring everything, forgiving nothing. "Why do you linger?" Captain Millers hailed her. "To mend the hours," the girl replied, voice layered as if several lifetimes spoke together. She drew from her pocket a fusee chain thin as spider silk, and flung it across the gap to our skiff. "But the river loses parts faster than I can fix them." Finch rose unsteadily. "My boy," he croaked, reaching. The girl tilted her head. I realized she wore the same features as the portrait in Finch's pocket, but altered by seasons he had never witnessed. She might have been his son in some timeline recast into different flesh. Finch lunged. The skiff rocked violently, sending Kojiro overboard. The deckhand plunged into the glittering mass of dials, and a kaleidoscope of scenes erupted around him, his birth, his first stolen kiss, the wharfside tavern he would die in. Each flash, a lantern slide. Kojiro's body dissolved into these moments, until there was no man, only narrative segments, scattered like disassembled gears. Sable hauled Finch back by his collar. Captain Mellors swore an oath. Stricken from ordinary language, "We return. Now." The tide disagreed. Clock faces in a radius turned scarlet like heated iron. They swirled, forging a whirlpool. Our skiff pitched. I clung to the gunwale, and in the storm of ticking I caught glimpses of my own life, pen strokes on pages that did not exist, love letters I never posted, a cottage by a marsh where a child learned my lullaby. Desire cut me deep, not for fame, but to claim the personal smallness I had forfeited to chase legends. "Hold fast!" the captain shouted. Sable braced the tiller with brute strength born of terror. Finch muttered to the river, negotiating with hours the way gamblers coaxed dice. Then, as abruptly as fury had come, stillness fell. We had been carried to the centre of the river, an enormous basin where the clocks flattened into an almost mirror-smooth sheet. Every dial face up. Hands arrested at different positions. The hush was surgical. In that silence, a figure emerged. A tall man wrought of coiled mainsprings and crown wheels. His beard was a cascade of oscillating pendulums. At his feet, smaller horological homunculi scurried, oiling joints that squeaked like baby birds. "I am the regulator," he intoned, voice deep enough to rattle teeth. "Keeper of what remains unkept." Captain Mellis lifted her chin. "We wish passage beyond this river." The regulator regarded us with apertures that mimicked eyes but contained rotating escapements. "No vessel passes unless balanced. Each soul bears deviation. My tides correct them." He gestured at Finch. "This one's variance is grief. He must surrender it or be recalibrated." Finch sobbed. "Take it, only give me my boy back." The regulator plucked a pendulum from his beard and offered it. "Wound grief becomes memory. Memory becomes rhythm. Rhythm you may carry without drowning." Finch accepted the pendulum. Instantly his image solidified, no longer flickering between ages, but settling into a middle path, older than he had hoped, younger than he had feared. He collapsed in relief. Next, the regulator faced me. "Chronicler, your deviation is detachment. You observe yet refuse to belong. Will you yield that?" My throat tightened. Without detachment, I risked shattering under the weight of every story. Yet I also understood. Lives recorded but unlived rang hollow. Slowly, I nodded. A smaller homunculus approached, unscrewed a plate in my chest I had never known existed, and inserted a tiny balance wheel that ticked in sympathy with my heart. Instantly, colours sharpened, sounds warmed. I could feel the texture of air, the sorrow of missing sailors, the promise of tides yet to turn. Sable's deviation proved to be rage masked as duty. Kojuro's absence became his measure. The regulator adjusted what he could, mourned what he could not, then spoke. "You are balanced. Passage is granted, but note this. Return is unlikely. Upstream lies the mouth of beginnings. Downstream, the gutter of ends. Choose." Captain Mellis looked at her crew, now just 4, where once were 12. "We go forward," she decided. "If beginnings await, we'll greet them." The regulator extended an arm, gears rearranged, revealing a corridor through the clocks, a sluice where dials aligned into a glistening pathway. Our skiff slid without oar or sail, drawn by magnetism of undiscovered hours. Around us, the river's surface filmed over with a skin of frost. Time momentarily halted to let us slip between seconds. Beyond the corridor rose frangipani trees, heavy with pocket watch fruit. Their branches arced over water, dropping seconds like petals. At each splash, a new tributary branched, hissing into existence, bearing some history freshly minted. I laughed, despite myself. The sound tasted of cinnamon and salt. Ahead, the horizon fractured into overlapping dawns. One lavender, one persimmon, one emerald. Each dawn belonged to a separate world, and all were equally tangible. Our skiff, as though consulting unseen calculus, chose the persimmon dawn. We breached the horizon like a bubble through membrane and found ourselves in calm waters. Real water, reflecting a sky with twin suns just touching mast tips of distant junks. The skiff's hull reconfigured with a shiver. The wood regained natural grain where previously brass flecks had embedded. Finch inhaled, and the breath sounded like acceptance. Sable stared at her hands, free of tremor for the first time since conscripting. Captain Melisse, normally stoic, allowed a smile, but I, chronicler newly susceptible, felt an ache. Already the memory of the river threatened to slide into myth, details sloughing like scales. I reached for my journal. Ink flowed easily now. I wrote quickly, capturing names, sensations, the regulated still point that existed between deviation. The more I wrote, the firmer the images held. We rode toward a shoreline where temples shimmered in sunlight that smelled faintly of peppermint. As we neared, a dozen children sprinted down the jetty, waving red ribbons, welcoming, it seemed, whoever arrived by persimmon dawn. One child clutched a stuffed gull stitched from scraps of sailcloth. Another wore a cap too large. Finch stiffened. He peered at the boy with the cap. Recognition dawned, slow but inexorable. It was not the same sun, different freckles, different stance, but in the breadth between those differences, Finch discovered wholeness. He bowed his head and murmured a blessing, neither prayer nor oath. We anchored beside a lotus blossom buoy and stepped upon new land. The first footfall felt like entering a story rather than continuing one. The villagers greeted us with bowls of stew whose steam rose in the shape of spirals, each twist echoing the coils of mainsprings we had left behind. They spoke a language foreign yet somehow understood, built as much on cadence as syllable. They asked from whence we came. "The Clock River," Captain Melis answered. Not a single villager looked surprised. One elder, stooped by decades, tapped her temple knowingly. "All rivers lead where hearts correct, if you brave the tide." That night, under twin sunset glow, we shared tales. Finch offered the pendulum gift, and the village smith slipped it into a newborn's cradle to bless her sleep cycles. Sable taught the harbour youth the slipknot that had saved her from hanging rigging in gale. The captain drafted maps. I read aloud my account of our navigation, every ear leaning forward as though thirsty for the tick. Then, while embers popped, another visitor arrived. Rig. He approached across the dark beach, hand in hand with the ribboned woman from his vision. Both younger than memory, older than longing. They nodded to us, no explanation needed, and joined the circle. The river, it seemed, did not merely erase. It redistributed. Days unfolded, though here days were counted in petals shed by dawn lotus rather than hours. We repaired the Firefly, provisioning her with unfamiliar fruits that glowed teal at dusk. We debated returning to chart what lay downstream. The gutter of Enziet, each time the idea surfaced, silence swallowed it. Some destinations feel like conclusions writ in stone. Others, like paragraphs left intentionally unfinished. We had chosen Genesis. Endings could wait. Still, I feared forgetting. So I sought the village's eldest horologist, a woman whose workshop chimed with gentle disharmony. I told her of my dread. She guided me to a window overlooking tranquil harbour. "Watch the tide," she said. "See how water erases footprints, yet the shore remembers being touched. Memory isn't in the mark, it's in the meeting." She handed me a small pocket chronometer fashioned from driftwood and coral. Its face was blank. "It doesn't keep time," she explained. "It keeps story. Each moment you cherish will engrave itself invisibly. When you open it years from now, you'll read by feel." I carried the blank chronometer everywhere. Each laugh, each salt sting, each marvel at twin suns became imperceptible etchings under my thumb. Months or petals later, the Firefly was seaworthy. Captain Melis convened us beneath wind bells. "We have a choice," she said. "Sail onward into this world or return to the ocean we knew." Finch placed a steady hand on the rail. "My course is here. The river unknotted what grief could not. I'll stay." Sable wished to explore inland ruins rumoured to sing when moonlight struck quartz. She pledged to meet us again, though both knew such pledges bend in long tides. So the crew thinned further until only the captain and I remained convinced of sailing. Departure dawned arrived, rosy saffron beyond twin suns. Villagers gifted us sails embroidered with their constellations, maps drawn on rice paper that smelled of jasmine, and water skins lined with silver filament to keep memories sweet. Finch pressed into my palm the pendulum, now strung on leather. "For balance," he said. We raised anchor. As the Firefly edged from harbour, villagers rang chimes tuned to no scale I recognised yet somehow remembered. Their resonance mirrored the regulator's beard pendulums, softened by human throats humming along. Out of sight of land, we found sea charts irrelevant. Stars older than ours presided. Each evening, the captain and I studied them, discovering that they rearranged according to our heartbeat pace. Time remained pliable, but no longer menacing. I felt the balance wheel within me spin content. One night, on calm deck, Captain Mellis asked if I regretted surrendering detachment. I considered. It feels like carrying living cargo, I admitted, but I would not cast it overboard. The weight is the proof. She smiled. Rare, genuine. Then her eyes tracked something across the water. A pulse of luminescence flared starboard, surface rippling, not with fish, but with tiny clock faces. A tributary of our old river, slipping through worlds like contraband. It shimmered a moment, beckoning. The captain dipped her hand. A single watch floated up, surface engraved with her own name in cursive. She turned it over, wound it, listened. The ticking matched her pulse. Quietly, she pocketed it, and neither of us spoke. Some gifts arrive after the lesson, not before. We sailed on, chasing horizons that swallowed themselves like Mobius loops. Days blurred, not lost but layered. My journal thickened, its earlier pages now luminous whenever moonlight fell. Whenever I opened the wooden chronometer, my fingers brushed grooves invisible to sight yet undeniable to skin, and each groove played back a moment, like grooves on a record coaxing melody from silence. The last image I will inscribe before closing this account is of a dawn where water turned silver as unwound spring and distant cliffs echoed with bells forged from seashells. Somewhere behind those cliffs, the river of clocks continues to roll, aligning destinies for sailors, yet unmet. Maybe one tide will summon us again. If so, I will step aboard willingly, for now I know. Tides that reset what's forgotten do not erase us. They teach us which parts we choose to remember. I end the saga with the simple hush that follows a bell's final vibration. The hush where possibilities wait to be named, and the next second has not yet chosen its face.